Imagine a world nearly 4,000 years ago, a landscape of deserts and rivers in what we now call Iraq. This was Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. And in this bustling region, nestled along the mighty Euphrates River, was a city. A city you've heard of, but not as you know it. This was Babylon, around 1900 BC, and it was, well, kind of a nobody. Forget the legendary hanging gardens or the towering ziggurats you see in movies. At this time, Babylon was just another small city-state, overshadowed by giants. Cities like Uruk, and Akkad were the real power players. They had grand histories, massive temples, and kings whose names were already legends. They were the New Yorks and Londons of their day, while Babylon was more like a quiet regional town with potential. Mesopotamia was a chaotic patchwork of these competing cities. Think of it like a season of Game of Thrones, but with more mudbricks and less dragons. Everyone was vying for power, land, and control of the precious water and trade routes. After the great Third Dynasty of Ur collapsed a century earlier, it was a free-for-all. Cities like Isin and Larsa were the top contenders, constantly battling for supremacy. Babylon was in the mix, but it wasn't a favorite to win, it was just trying to survive. If you were to walk through Babylon back then, you wouldn't be overly impressed. Its walls enclosed a modest area. The buildings were made of simple mud brick. The standard construction material of the time, there were no monumental palaces or inspiring structures that screamed empire. The streets would have been filled with a diverse crowd, farmers coming in from the fields, artisans crafting pottery, merchants haggling over goods, and scribes hurrying to their duties. It was a functional city. But it lacked the grandeur and economic muscle of its rivals. The city was run by local rulers, essentially mayors with kingly titles. Their focus was hyperlocal, making sure the irrigation canals that fed the crops were maintained, settling disputes between neighbors, and managing the city's granaries. Their authority barely extended beyond the city walls. They were constantly looking over their shoulders. Wary of aggressive neighbors and shifting alliances, this volatile political climate meant that long-term planning was a luxury. But even in this state of relative obscurity, the seeds of future greatness were being planted. Culturally, Babylon was absorbing the rich heritage of Mesopotamia. The ancient Sumerian language was fading, and Akkadian was becoming the common tongue for trade and government, the English of its day. In little schools, Babylonian scribes were mastering cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script, on clay tablets. They weren't writing epic poems just yet, but they were meticulously recording everything: grain shipments, land sales, marriage contracts. This obsession with record-keeping was building a powerful administrative foundation. Religion was the bedrock of society. The Babylonians worshipped a pantheon of Mesopotamian gods: Anu, the sky god, Enlil, the god of wind and storms, and the powerful goddess Ishtar. Temples dedicated to these deities were the heart of the city. They weren't just places of worship, they were massive economic institutions. The temples owned vast tracts of land, employed huge numbers of people, and acted like divine corporations, driving much of the local economy. And let's not forget Babylon's secret weapon, its location. Situated right on the Euphrates River, it was perfectly placed. The river was a superhighway for trade, connecting Babylon to cities up and down the Mesopotamian plain. It allowed Babylonian merchants to tap into regional trade networks, bringing in valuable goods and resources. The fertile soil on the riverbanks, nourished by annual floods, provided a stable food supply, which was crucial for supporting a growing urban population. The rulers of this early Babylon, though not mighty conquerors, were smart. They focused on fundamentals. They organized labor to build and maintain the intricate network of irrigation canals, a lifeline in the arid climate. This wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential. It required sophisticated organization and management, honing the skills needed to run a more complex state. The growing bureaucracy of scribes and officials was creating a system of governance that was efficient and resilient. There was another crucial element stirring in the pot: new people. For generations, groups known as the Amorites had been migrating into Mesopotamia from the west. At first, they were seen as outsiders, semi-nomadic wanderers. But they gradually settled down, integrating into the cities and the countryside. They were ambitious and politically savvy. Over time, Amorite leaders started taking power in many Mesopotamian cities, including Babylon. This infusion of new blood and new leadership brought fresh energy and ambition, shaking up the old political order. So, while on the surface Babylon looked like just another contender in a crowded field, underneath, something profound was happening. The city wasn't rising through dramatic, sweeping conquests. Its ascent was quieter, more methodical. It was a slow burn, built on careful administration, economic stability, and the gradual consolidation of power. It was about managing resources effectively, building strong institutions, and patiently waiting for the right moment. This period teaches us a powerful lesson about how empires can be born. It's not always about the flashy military genius or the charismatic leader who appears out of nowhere. Sometimes, it's about the steady and glamorous work of state building. It's about laying the groundwork, brick by brick, law by law, canal by canal. As the 19th century BC gave way to the 18th, Babylon was no longer a city to be underestimated. It had a solid foundation, a strategic location, and ambitious leadership. It was poised on the brink of a transformation, ready to step out of the shadows and onto the world stage. The era of a minor city-state was ending, and the age of the Babylonian Empire, the one we all know from the history books, was about to begin. All leading up to the reign of its most famous king, Hammurabi. Segment 2 Poster 3 Collapse or Broken Mesopotamia in 2004 year BC, the third dynasty of Ur, which had maintained political control over much of southern Mesopotamia for several generations, came to an end. This collapse marked a turning point in the history of the region. The previously centralized and bureaucratically efficient system disintegrated, leaving a power vacuum that would have lasting consequences for Mesopotamian city-states. The third dynasty of Ur had been a period characterized by relative stability and administrative organization. The dynasty's rulers had maintained control over a complex network of cities. Through a centralized government based in Ur, they managed agricultural production, canal maintenance, trade, and legal affairs through an extensive bureaucracy staffed by scribes and officials. This system had helped secure economic productivity and political unity in a challenging environment. With the fall of Ur III, however, this structure fractured. Cities that had once been subordinate or integrated into their administration regained autonomy. The power vacuum created conditions for increased rivalry among city-states. Local rulers asserted their independence, often competing for control over land, water resources, and trade routes. One of the most critical challenges faced by these independent city-states was the management of irrigation systems. Mesopotamia's agriculture depended heavily on canals and waterways that required constant maintenance. Without coordinated management, canals could become clogged or damaged, leading to reduced agricultural yields and food shortages. In this fragmented context, Babylon was one among many city-states navigating a complex and unstable political landscape. Other prominent cities in southern Mesopotamia, including Isin, Larsa, and Eshnunna, emerged as significant regional powers. These cities competed with one another for influence, occasionally forming alliances but more often engaging in military conflict or diplomatic maneuvering. At the same time, new groups were migrating into the region. The Amorites, semi-nomadic peoples from the western deserts, began to enter Mesopotamia during this period. Initially, the Amorites lived outside of established city centers, maintaining a pastoral lifestyle that involved seasonal movements with herds of livestock. Over time, however, the Amorites increasingly settled within Mesopotamian cities and rural areas. Their integration into the region was gradual and complex. While early Mesopotamian texts sometimes portray the Amorites as outsiders or barbarians, archaeological and textual evidence shows that they eventually became an influential part of Mesopotamian society. Amorite leaders began to assume positions of power in various city-states, including Babylon. These rulers, often of Amorite descent, adopted Mesopotamian political, religious, and administrative practices while maintaining some of their own cultural traditions. This blending of influences contributed to shifts in political organization and leadership styles. Despite these changes, the overall political environment remained fragmented and unstable. City-states frequently engaged in conflicts over territory and resources. Wars, raids, and shifting alliances shaped the landscape. The balance of power was in constant flux. With no single city able to dominate the entire region for an extended period, economically, trade continued to be a vital aspect of city-state survival and prosperity. Mesopotamian cities exchanged goods such as grain, textiles, metals, and luxury items with one another and with distant regions. Control over trade routes was often a source of contention, influencing political and military decisions. Culturally, the Poster III period saw continued use of the Akkadian language for administration and diplomacy. The scribal tradition remains central to governance, with written records documenting legal transactions, treaties, and religious texts. The practice of codifying laws, while not yet exemplified by Hammurabi's code, was developing in various cities. The breakdown of centralized control also affected social structures. The power of temple institutions and local elites grew in some cities, while the authority of kings or governors fluctuated. In some cases, local elites acted independently, further complicating the political landscape. Babylon's position during this time was that of a rising city-state seeking to assert itself amidst regional instability. The city's leaders faced the challenge of maintaining agricultural productivity through canal repair and coordination. They also worked to establish administrative systems that could support governance and economic activity. The fragmented conditions of Poster III Mesopotamia set the stage for new political experiments. City-states like Babylon would gradually build their power through a combination of internal development and external diplomacy or conflict. The period was one of transition from the highly centralized III state to a more competitive and decentralized political order. This era is critical for understanding the dynamics that enabled Babylon's later rise. The city's ability to adapt to changing circumstances, manage resources effectively, and incorporate new populations like the Amorites would prove essential in its path toward regional prominence. The political and economic fragmentation, coupled with demographic changes, created both challenges and opportunities. Leaders who could navigate this complex environment had the potential to consolidate power and influence. Babylon's gradual rise was neither rapid nor guaranteed, but rather the result of sustained effort in governance and strategy. In summary, the fall of the Third Dynasty of around 2004 BC led to a fragmented Mesopotamia marked by independent city-states, competition for resources, and the arrival of Amorite groups. These conditions shaped the political landscape in which Babylon would begin its ascent, emphasizing the importance of irrigation management, administrative capacity, and adaptation to shifting power structures. Segment 3. The Amorite kings who built the foundation. When approximately 1900 and 1792 BC, Babylon experienced a period of gradual development under the leadership of several Amorite rulers. These early kings, including figures such as Semuabum, Samuel, and Sabium, established the essential structures that would enable Babylon to rise from a relatively modest city-state to a central power in Mesopotamia. Their reigns marked a shift from constant warfare toward a focus on administrative consolidation, infrastructure, and internal stability. The Amorites were a Semitic-speaking people originally from the regions west of Mesopotamia, often described as semi-nomadic pastoralists. Over the course of the second millennium year BC, they migrated eastward, settling in Mesopotamian cities and rural areas. Despite initial perceptions by Mesopotamian city-states as outsiders, Amorite groups increasingly became integrated into the political and social fabric of the region. Babylon was among the cities where Amorite influence grew significantly during this period. The Amorite rulers adopted many aspects of Mesopotamian governance and culture, including the use of Akkadian language for administration and cuneiform script for record-keeping. They maintained existing religious traditions while also promoting the local patron deities of Babylon, the reign of Sumubum, traditionally dated to around 1894–1881 year BC, is often considered the beginning of the Old Babylonian dynasty. Though his precise political accomplishments are not extensively documented, he is credited with establishing a hereditary Amorite kingship in Babylon. His rule marked a transition from a collection of city-states toward the formation of a more unified political entity under Babylonian leadership, following Sumubum. Sumulal ruled approximately from 1880 to 1845 year BC. His reign is better documented and shows efforts to expand Babylonian control over surrounding territories. He undertook military campaigns to secure and protect the city's borders, consolidating control over neighboring towns and regions. These campaigns were aimed at stabilizing Babylon's influence in a fragmented political environment. Sumulal also invested in strengthening Babylon's internal administration. Records indicate repairs to irrigation canals, which were vital to agricultural productivity in the region. The maintenance of these canals was essential for supporting the food supply and sustaining the city's population. Efficient water management was a central task for any Mesopotamian ruler and a key to political legitimacy. Sabium, who ruled approximately from 1844 to 1831 year BC, continued the policies of his predecessors. His reign is noted for further administrative organization and territorial consolidation, while less is known about specific military activities. The period is characterized by efforts to maintain internal order and promote economic stability. Throughout these reigns, Babylon's rulers focused on the practical aspects of governance rather than pursuing rapid territorial expansion or military conquest. Their approach reflected an understanding that a durable empire required a strong administrative foundation, effective resource management, and social stability. One important aspect of this administrative development was the promotion of scribal schools. These institutions trained individuals in reading and writing cuneiform script, essential skills for managing legal, economic, and religious documents. The growth of scribal culture under the Amorite kings ensured that Babylon could maintain complex bureaucratic functions necessary for statecraft. The Amorite kings also worked to fortify Babylon's city walls. Defensive structures were critical in a region where city-states frequently engaged in warfare and raids. Strong fortifications protected the city's inhabitants and assets and served as a symbol of the ruler's power and authority. During this foundational period, Babylon's society remained stratified, with a ruling elite, priests, merchants, artisans, farmers, and slaves. The legal frameworks and social customs that governed interactions within and between these groups were being shaped through ongoing practice and documentation, setting the stage for later formal codifications of law. Religious institutions retained significant influence in Babylonian society. Temples dedicated to deities such as Marduk and Ishtar functioned not only as centers of worship but also as economic hubs. Temple complexes managed large estates, collected offerings, and employed numerous personnel. The interconnection of religion and administration reinforced the ruler's legitimacy and maintained social order. Trade networks during this period extended beyond Babylon's immediate region. Merchants engaged in the exchange of commodities such as textiles, metals, grains, and luxury goods. These commercial activities linked Babylon with other Mesopotamian cities and with distant regions, contributing to the city's economic vitality. It is important to note that this period did not witness the rapid rise of Babylon as a military empire. Instead, the Amorite kings laid the groundwork for future expansion through patient state building and consolidation. Their reigns established the political and administrative stability necessary for Babylon's eventual dominance in Mesopotamia. By the end of this foundational phase, Babylon had evolved from a modest city-state into a more organized and strategically positioned entity. The institutions developed under the Amorite kings provided the framework for governance, economic management, and social regulation that would support the city's ambitions. This phase of Babylon's history underscores the importance of administration, infrastructure, and gradual political consolidation in the formation of early empires. It illustrates how the careful management of resources and institutions can create the conditions for future expansion and influence. In summary, from approximately 1900 to 1792 year BC, Amorite rulers such as Semuabum, Semuil, and Sabium built the foundational structures of Babylon. Their focus on irrigation, fortification, administration, and cultural integration set the stage for the city's rise. This period was marked by steady development rather than dramatic conquest, emphasizing the role of governance in shaping Babylon's future. In 1792 year BC, Hammurabi ascended to the throne of Babylon, inheriting a city-state surrounded by powerful rivals. The political landscape of Mesopotamia at this time was complex and competitive. Babylon faced threats from established kingdoms such as Larsa to the south, Mari along the Euphrates to the west, and Assyria in the north. Each of these city-states held strategic territories and had considerable military and economic resources. Hammurabi's accession marked the beginning of a reign that would last nearly 4 decades. However, his initial years on the throne did not begin with immediate military conquest. Instead, Hammurabi focused on strengthening Babylon's internal structures and governance. This approach reflected a strategic patience, prioritizing the consolidation of power before embarking on external campaigns. One of Hammurabi's early priorities was repairing and maintaining the critical irrigation canals that sustained agriculture in the region, in Mesopotamia's arid environment. The success of agriculture depended on the careful management of water resources. Canals needed regular cleaning and repair to prevent silting and to ensure equitable water distribution. Failure to maintain this infrastructure could result in crop failures and social unrest. Hammurabi also worked to unify and systematize the laws governing his realm. While the practice of law codification existed before his reign, Hammurabi's legal code would become the most comprehensive and detailed of its time. It addressed a wide range of civil, criminal, and economic matters, establishing clear rules and consequences to promote social order and predictability. Rather than issuing the code immediately upon ascending the throne, Hammurabi's early years likely involved consultations with legal experts, scribes, and administrators to develop a thorough and effective legal framework. The code would later be publicly displayed, emphasizing the king's role as the divine guarantor of justice. Administratively, Hammurabi strengthened the royal bureaucracy. He expanded the role of officials responsible for tax collection, resource management, and legal enforcement. Effective governance required a network of capable administrators who could implement royal policies across the city and its territories. In addition to these internal reforms, Hammurabi sought to increase royal authority through religious legitimacy. Babylon's patron deity, Marduk, gained prominence during his reign. By aligning himself with Marduk, Hammurabi reinforced the sacred nature of his kingship. This religious backing was essential for maintaining the loyalty of the populace and the priesthood. Hammurabi's reign also involved diplomatic engagement with neighboring states. While his later years would be marked by military campaigns, his initial strategy involved balancing relations with rival kingdoms through treaties, alliances, and strategic marriages. This approach allowed Babylon to avoid unnecessary conflicts and focus on strengthening its foundations. The careful and deliberate nature of Hammurabi's early reign suggests a leader aware of the complexities of Mesopotamian politics, rather than rushing to war. Hammurabi invested in the long-term stability of his kingdom, building the administrative, legal, and economic systems necessary to support future expansion. This period also saw the growth of Babylon as a cultural center. Architectural projects, including temple renovations and public buildings, reflected the city's rising status. These constructions served both practical and symbolic purposes, demonstrating royal power and religious devotion. By focusing on governance, law, and infrastructure, Hammurabi set the stage for Babylon's emergence as a dominant regional power. His reign would later be defined by military conquest, but these initial decades were characterized by state building and consolidation. The strategic patience exercised by Hammurabi during this phase was instrumental in preparing Babylon to seize opportunities as rival city-states weakened due to war and drought. or internal strife. When conditions shifted, Babylon was positioned to act decisively. In summary, Hammurabi's reign from 1792 year BC began with a focus on internal reform and consolidation rather than immediate warfare. His efforts to repair irrigation, codify laws, strengthen administration, and secure religious legitimacy laid the foundation for Babylon's future expansion and dominance. In Mesopotamia. Segment 5, Law as a Weapon. The Code of Hammurabi began approximately 1792 and 1750 year BC. During the reign of King Hammurabi, Babylon underwent one of its most pivotal developments, the creation and public promulgation of the Code of Hammurabi. This code is among the earliest and most complete legal documents to survive from the ancient world. It stands as a testament to the use of law as a foundational tool of governance and social control in the Old Babylonian Empire. The code was inscribed on a basalt stele, standing over 2 meters tall, designed to be publicly displayed in central locations accessible to Babylon's populace. This public presentation was not merely symbolic, it served a practical purpose. It ensured that laws were known to the citizenry and that the king's justice was visible and transparent. The stele's imposing size and durable material signaled the permanence and authority of the law. At the top of the stele, a carved relief depicts Hammurabi receiving the laws directly from the god Shamash, the Mesopotamian deity of justice and the sun. This iconography communicated the divine origin and legitimacy of the laws. By framing the code as divinely sanctioned, Hammurabi positioned himself not only as a political leader but also as a mediator between the gods and his people. This divine endorsement reinforced the sacred nature of legal order and the king's role as the guarantor of justice. The prologue of the code emphasizes Hammurabi's mission to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evil, to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak. This statement reflects the intended purpose of the law to establish social order by providing clear rules and consequences that apply to all levels of society. The code consists of 282 individual laws written in Akkadian cuneiform, covering a wide range of legal topics including property rights, commercial transactions, family relations, labor, personal injury, and criminal offenses. These laws are structured as conditional statements, beginning with "if a man," followed by the particular action or offense, and then specifying the corresponding punishment or remedy. One of the notable features of the code is its recognition of social stratification. The laws distinguish between free men, commoners, and slaves, and prescribe penalties accordingly. For example, a crime committed against a noble could incur a harsher punishment than the same offense against a lower status individual. This social differentiation underscores the hierarchical nature of Old Babylonian society while establishing a legal framework within which all persons were subject to rules and protections. In the realm of property and commerce, the code regulates contracts, sales, loans, and debts. These provisions address the responsibilities of parties in commercial transactions and specify penalties for fraud or breach of contract. Interest rates on loans were also regulated to prevent exploitative lending practices, and the conditions under which debt could lead to servitude or release were clearly defined. Family law forms a significant portion of the code. It includes rules governing marriage, divorce, inheritance, and parental authority. The laws specify the rights and duties of spouses, conditions under which a woman could seek a divorce, and procedures for inheritance when a family member died without heirs. For example, a husband could divorce his wife under certain conditions. But the law also protected women by requiring compensation or provisions in some cases. Children's rights, especially regarding inheritance and legitimacy, were also codified to maintain family continuity. Labor laws address the responsibilities and liabilities of workers and employers. These include regulations concerning the wages of servants, artisans, and laborers, as well as standards for professions such as builders and physicians. The code held professionals accountable for negligence or malpractice, mandating compensation or penalties where harm resulted from poor workmanship or medical treatment. Criminal law sections enumerate offenses such as theft, assault, false accusation, and homicide. The penalties ranged from fines and restitution to corporal punishment and, in extreme cases, death. The code's punishments were often based on the principle of lex talionis, the law of retaliation, best exemplified by the phrase an eye for an eye. This principle sought proportional justice, ensuring that penalties were commensurate with offenses. The code also established legal procedures and the role of judges in adjudicating disputes. It outlined how evidence should be presented, the responsibilities of judges to hear cases fairly, and the use of oaths or ordeals in certain trials. These procedural details aim to standardize the administration of justice and reduce arbitrariness. The Code of Hammurabi functioned as more than a legal text. It was a political instrument reinforcing the king's authority. By codifying laws and making them publicly known, Hammurabi centralized power and extended his control over a diverse and multi-ethnic population. The code helped unify various city-states under a single legal system, facilitating governance and integration. The significance of the code extended beyond its immediate context. It influenced subsequent Mesopotamian legal traditions and provided a model for future legal codes in the ancient Near East and beyond. The concept of a written, publicly accessible legal code embodied principles of legal certainty and state authority that have endured throughout history. Archaeological discoveries have shed light on the code's impact and use. Copies of portions of the laws were found on clay tablets throughout Mesopotamia, indicating their circulation and application in courts and administrative offices. The basalt stele itself was uncovered in 1901 at the site of Susa, in modern-day Iran, where it had been taken as war booty by the Elamites several centuries after Hammurabi's reign. Today, the stele is housed in the Louvre Museum in Paris, where it continues to be studied as a vital artifact illuminating the origins of legal systems and statecraft in human civilization. In sum, the Code of Hammurabi, produced between 1792 and 1750 year BC, represents a landmark achievement in legal history. Its comprehensive and public nature transformed law into a central mechanism of governance. By establishing clear rules, social hierarchies, and administrative procedures, Hammurabi's code contributed to the stability and integration of the Old Babylonian Empire and left a lasting legacy on the development of law. Segment 6. War by timing: how Babylon conquered rivals between approximately 1763 and 1755 year BC. The city-state of Babylon transformed from a regional power into a dominant empire through a series of military campaigns characterized by careful timing, strategic calculation, and methodical execution. The ruler responsible for this transformation was King Hammurabi, whose approach to conquest emphasized patience, precise opportunity, and the integration of new territories under a uniform legal and administrative system. To understand this period, it is essential to consider the political landscape of Mesopotamia at the time. Following the collapse of the Third Dynasty of Ur and the subsequent fragmentation of power among numerous city-states, the region was marked by ongoing conflict and shifting alliances. Key rivals to Babylon included Larsa in the south, Ashnuna in the east, Mari to the west, and Assyria further north. Each city-state maintained its own military forces, political leadership, and economic resources, competing for control over fertile lands, trade routes, and strategic positions. During the mid-18th century year BC, these rival powers were experiencing their own challenges: prolonged warfare, internal strife, and environmental factors such as drought affected their stability and ability to project power effectively. These circumstances provided an opening that Hammurabi recognized and exploited with calculated military operations. Hammurabi's strategy deviated from reckless aggression or rapid expansion. Instead, he pursued a measured approach, advancing his conquests in stages, each carefully planned and timed to maximize the chances of success while minimizing unnecessary losses. This approach hinged on several principles: striking when rivals were weakened, isolating targets to prevent alliances from forming against Babylon, and rapidly consolidating control to secure gains. One of the earliest and most significant campaigns was against the city-state of Larsa, situated in southern Mesopotamia. Larsa controlled vital agricultural areas and access to the Persian Gulf, making it a critical economic and strategic objective. At the time, Larsa was engaged in protracted conflicts and faced internal divisions that diminished its capacity to resist external threats effectively. In 1763 BCE, Hammurabi's forces initiated a military campaign against Larsa. The siege of Larsa involved a combination of direct assault and blockade tactics aimed at cutting off supplies and isolating the city from potential reinforcements. Babylonian troops utilized siege engines, battering rams, and constructed earthworks to breach the city's defenses. The campaign culminated in the successful capture of Larsa, marking a pivotal moment in Babylon's rise. The fall of Larsa not only expanded Babylon's territorial control but also secured critical trade routes along the Euphrates River, facilitating the movement of goods and troops. It also diminished a major rival, allowing Babylon to focus on consolidating power in other parts of Mesopotamia. Concurrently, Hammurabi directed military efforts toward Eshnunna, located east of Babylon. Eshnunna had previously been a prosperous city-state due to its control over regional trade and agricultural production. However, by the time of Hammurabi's campaigns, Eshnunna was experiencing difficulties caused by prolonged military engagements and economic strain. In approximately 1761 BCE, Hammurabi's forces launched operations against Eshnunna, employing tactics similar to those used at Larsa. The campaign combined swift military strikes with efforts to destabilize local leadership and undermine resistance. Following a series of engagements and sieges, Eshnunna fell under Babylonian control. This conquest further extended Babylon's reach and secured its eastern borders. Westward, the city of Mari presented another key target. Located on the Euphrates River near the western frontier of Mesopotamia, Mari had a well-established political network and had maintained alliances with neighboring regions. Its fortified position and diplomatic connections posed challenges to Babylonian expansion. Hammurabi's approach to Mari involved isolating the city through the conquest or neutralization of allied territories and disrupting trade and communication lines. Military campaigns against Mari were methodical, involving sieges and smaller engagements to weaken the city's defenses and morale, by systematically cutting off support. Hammurabi's forces eventually compelled Mari's submission during this period. The northern power of Assyria, with its capital at Ashur, maintained significant military strength but was preoccupied with its own regional affairs during these years. Hammurabi's strategy deliberately avoided prolonged conflict with Assyria at this stage, focusing instead on southern and central Mesopotamian territories where his chances of swift victories were greater. Throughout these campaigns, Hammurabi combined military action with diplomacy. In some cases, he negotiated alliances or truces with weaker states or local rulers, incorporating them into Babylon's sphere of influence without direct conflict. This diplomatic flexibility allowed for more efficient use of resources and prevented the formation of coalitions against Babylon. Logistical preparation was a key factor in the success of these military operations. Hammurabi's administration ensured that armies were well supplied and could mobilize quickly. Roads and communication systems were maintained and expanded, enabling rapid transmission of orders and coordination of forces across the growing empire. The conquest of rival city-states also involved the establishment of administrative control. Following military victories, Babylon installed governors or local officials loyal to the king to oversee governance, tax collection, and legal administration. The imposition of the Code of Hammurabi's laws served to unify these diverse populations under a consistent legal framework, facilitating stability and integration. Economically, the expansion increased Babylon's control over agricultural production, trade routes, and resource-rich areas. Tribute and taxes from newly acquired territories supplemented the royal treasury, enabling further military and administrative initiatives. The military campaigns of this period were conducted using the standard Mesopotamian military techniques. Infantry soldiers, supported by chariots, archers, and siege engines, formed the core of Hammurabi's forces. City walls and fortifications remained important defensive structures, but many were overcome by protracted sieges, cutting off supplies, or breaching through coordinated assaults. The fall of Larsa, in particular, symbolized the shifting balance of power. Previously a dominant city-state, its defeat signaled Babylon's emergence as the central authority in Mesopotamia. The absorption of Larsa's lands and infrastructure considerably strengthened Babylon's economic and strategic position. Despite these military expansions, Hammurabi maintained efforts to ensure order within the empire. The use of law, administration, and appointments of loyal officials helped prevent uprisings and solidify control over newly acquired territories. By 1755 year BC, through a combination of military timing, strategic campaigns, and administrative integration, Babylon had unified much of southern and central Mesopotamia under its control. This achievement laid the groundwork for the Old Babylonian Empire's continued influence and expansion. Hammurabi's military successes during this period demonstrate the importance of strategic opportunity, measured action, and comprehensive governance in ancient statecraft. His campaigns were not marked by reckless conquest but by calculated moves that capitalized on rivals' weaknesses and ensured the sustainability of his empire. During the Old Babylonian period, between approximately 1760 and 1600 year BC, the political and religious landscape of Mesopotamia underwent a significant transformation. Central to this transformation was the elevation of the god Marduk, who rose from a relatively minor deity to become the supreme god of the Babylonian pantheon. This elevation was not only a religious development but a crucial political strategy that reinforced the authority of Babylonian kings and helped unify the diverse peoples under their control. To fully understand the importance of Marduk's rise, it is necessary to first consider the religious context of ancient Mesopotamia. The region's pantheon consisted of many gods, each associated with specific cities, natural phenomena, or aspects of life. Among the most prominent were Enlil, the god of air and the chief deity of the city of Nippur, Anu, the sky god, and he also called Enki, the god of water and wisdom. These deities had long held primary roles in Sumerian and Akkadian religious traditions. Before Babylon's rise to prominence, Marduk was regarded as a local god of Babylon, with a relatively modest following. The city itself was not yet the political or cultural center of Mesopotamia, so Marduk's influence was limited compared to the major gods worshipped in other powerful city-states. However, as Babylon expanded its political control, the religious status of Marduk was elevated correspondingly. This process of elevating a local god to national prominence is a known phenomenon in Mesopotamian history, where the religious and political spheres were closely interconnected. The key text that outlines Marduk's rise to supremacy is the Enuma Elish, commonly referred to as the Babylonian creation epic. This mythological narrative dates to the Old Babylonian period, though its final written form and dissemination occurred over the centuries that followed. The Enuma Elish recounts the origins of the cosmos, describing the primordial waters represented by the goddess Tiamat and the god Apsu. According to the epic, chaos ruled before the creation of the ordered world. Marduk's role in the Enuma Elish is that of a divine hero who defeats Tiamat, the embodiment of chaos and destruction. In the myth, Marduk splits Tiamat's body to form the heavens and earth, thus establishing cosmic order. He then creates humanity from the blood of the defeated gods to serve the divine realm. This myth not only places Marduk at the center of creation but also legitimizes his position as the leader of the gods, or king of the gods. The Enuma Elish was more than a religious text. It served as a political manifesto that justified Babylon's ascendancy. By portraying Marduk as the supreme deity who brought order out of chaos, the myth provided a divine rationale for Babylon's political dominance over Mesopotamia. The king of Babylon was presented as Marduk's earthly representative, and trusted with maintaining order and justice in accordance with divine will. This theological framework served several important functions within the empire. First, it provided the king with divine legitimacy. The Babylonian ruler was not merely a political figure but a chosen agent of Marduk, tasked with enforcing the god's laws and preserving cosmic balance. The Code of Hammurabi, a well-known legal document from this era, reflects this divine authority, as its prologue and epilogue invoke Marduk's sanction for the king's governance. Second, the elevation of Marduk helped unify the empire's diverse population. The Old Babylonian Empire included various ethnic groups, languages, and local religious traditions. While local gods remained important in individual cities, the prominence of Marduk created a shared religious focus that linked these groups within a single imperial framework. This shared theological system facilitated social cohesion and reinforced loyalty to the central authority. Physical manifestations of Marduk's prominence can be seen in the construction and maintenance of his main temple, the Sagila complex, located in Babylon. The Sagila temple was one of the largest and most significant religious structures in Mesopotamia. It served as the cult center for Marduk, where rituals, offerings, and ceremonies were performed to honor the god and seek his favor. The temple complex was more than a religious site. It was an economic powerhouse, controlling vast tracts of land and employing numerous personnel including priests, administrators, and laborers. The Sagila managed agricultural estates, workshops, and trade activities, contributing significantly to the empire's wealth. Temple estates provided resources for both religious and political functions. Demonstrating the intertwining of sacred and secular power, priests associated with Marduk's cult played essential roles beyond performing religious rituals. They were scholars, responsible for maintaining the knowledge necessary to conduct ceremonies correctly. They preserved and copied sacred texts, recorded astronomical observations, and contributed to the development of mathematics and medicine. This scholarly activity supported the administrative and scientific needs of the empire. Reinforcing the temple's central position in society, religious festivals connected to Marduk further cemented the goddess' central role in Babylonian political and social life. The Akitu festival, celebrated annually during the Babylonian New Year, was the most significant. During this multi-day event, elaborate rituals reenacted the creation myth and the victory of Marduk over chaos. The king himself participated, reaffirming his role as Marduk's representative. The festival involved processions, offerings, and the symbolic renewal of royal and divine authority. Through public spectacle and religious ceremony, the Akitu festival reinforced the cosmic order and the legitimacy of the Babylonian king's rule in the eyes of the people. It was an important mechanism for maintaining social order and political stability. While Marduk became the supreme deity, local gods continued to be worshipped throughout the empire. Temples to city-specific deities remained active, reflecting the persistence of traditional beliefs and practices. However, these gods were often integrated into the broader pantheon under Marduk's supremacy, acknowledging Babylon's religious and political leadership. This theological system also had long-term implications beyond the Old Babylonian Empire. Later, Mesopotamian dynasties, such as the Kassites and the Neo-Babylonian Empire, maintained Marduk's elevated status. The goddess' prominence influenced religious traditions in the wider Near East and had parallels in the development of monotheistic ideas in subsequent cultures. In conclusion, the elevation of Marduk to the position of the supreme deity was a deliberate and strategic process that intertwined religion with governance. It provided the Old Babylonian Empire with a unifying ideological framework that legitimized the king's authority, fostered social cohesion, and reinforced political control. This theological innovation was integral to Babylon's rise and enduring legacy in Mesopotamian history. Forget the kings, the battles, and the grand temples for a moment. What was it really like to live in the Old Babylonian Empire almost 4,000 years ago? We often think of ancient history as a series of epic events, but for the millions of people living under Babylonian rule, life was a daily reality shaped by laws, work, and family. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on this ancient civilization to explore the everyday lives of its people, from the farmers in the fields to the merchants in the bustling cities. This isn't just about the famous Code of Hammurabi, it's about how that code and the entire system it represented touched every single person. Let's start with the foundation of the empire, the farmers. Most people in Old Babylonia were farmers, living and working along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This was the breadbasket of the ancient world, but it wasn't easy living. Rainfall was scarce, so everything depended on a massive, complex network of irrigation canals. Imagine spending your days not just planting barley and wheat, but also digging and maintaining these vital waterways. It was backbreaking work, often overseen by local officials who made sure the water flowed to everyone. Without these canals, the empire would have starved. Life for a farmer was also a constant struggle with debt. If your harvest failed or you needed seed to plant, you'd have to borrow grain or silver from a wealthy landowner or a city merchant. Your future crops were the collateral. It was a risky business. A bad year could plunge you deep into debt. But this is where the famous laws came in. The Code of Hammurabi wasn't just about an eye for an eye. It had rules to stop lenders from getting too greedy. There were caps on interest rates and specific regulations on how debts could be collected. If a storm destroyed your crops, the law said your lender had to wait. These rules weren't just for show, they were designed to keep rural society stable and prevent widespread unrest. Now, let's leave the countryside and head into the city, to Babylon itself. This was the vibrant heart of the empire, a hub of trade and commerce. Merchants were the lifeblood of the urban economy. They weren't just local shopkeepers, they were international traders, connecting Mesopotamia with lands as far away as modern-day Turkey, Lebanon, and Iran. They dealt in everything: textiles, metals, timber, and exotic luxury goods. Think of it as an ancient global supply chain. And how did they manage all this without email or phones? With clay tablets and cuneiform script. Every deal, every loan, every partnership was meticulously recorded on a clay tablet. These weren't just informal agreements, they were legally binding contracts. If a shipment was late or the goods weren't as promised, you could take your tablet to court. This incredible level of bureaucracy and legal protection is what allowed long-distance trade to flourish. It created a system of trust, where a merchant in Babylon could do business with someone hundreds of miles away, confident that the law would back them up. So what about the people within this society? What was it like for women? It's easy to assume ancient societies were universally oppressive for women, but Old Babylonia was more complicated than that. Yes, it was a patriarchal society, but women had significant legal rights. They could own property, run their own businesses, and even initiate divorce. We have clay tablets that are essentially business records from women who managed taverns or leased out land. The Code of Hammurabi laid out specific rights for women regarding inheritance and financial support if a marriage ended. Of course, their lives were still largely defined by traditional roles. Most women's lives revolved around the home and raising children, and high-status positions like priests were usually reserved for men. Still, the image of a Babylonian woman was far from that of a powerless possession. She was an active participant in the legal and economic life of the empire. Of course, not everyone was free. Slavery was an accepted part of Babylonian society. People could become slaves in several ways: captured in war, sold by their families out of poverty, or forced into servitude to pay off a debt. Slaves did all kinds of work, from hard labor in the fields to skilled crafts in a city workshop or service in a wealthy household. Their lives were hard, and they were considered property. However, even here, the law offered some surprising protections. It was illegal to kill a slave without consequence, and there were rules about their treatment. Some slaves could even earn their own money, buy their freedom, and become integrated members of society. It's a starkly different concept of slavery from what we might imagine, deeply embedded in the economic and legal fabric of the time. Life in a city like Babylon was a mix of everyone. Picture a bustling marketplace filled with the sounds of different languages, the smell of spices, and baking bread. You'd see craftspeople in their workshops, government officials hurrying to administrative buildings, and scribes sitting in the shade, writing letters for those who couldn't. This brings us to another crucial part of Babylonian society: education. Being a scribe was a highly respected profession. It was the key to a career in government, religion, or business. Schools, or tablet houses, taught boys from wealthy or middle-class families how to read and write cuneiform, as well as mathematics and law. These scribes were the glue holding the empire together. They recorded everything: taxes, land sales, court cases, and royal decrees. Without this army of record keepers, the centralized control that defined the Babylonian Empire would have been impossible. The law wasn't just for merchants and officials, it permeated every aspect of social life. Local courts were busy places, hearing disputes over property, arguments between neighbors, and criminal cases. The system relied on judges, witnesses, and of course, written evidence on those all-important clay tablets. The goal was to resolve conflicts and maintain order according to a common set of rules. However, let's be clear, this wasn't a system of perfect equality. The law openly distinguished between different social classes. The punishment for injuring a nobleman was far more severe than for injuring a commoner or a slave. This social hierarchy was a fundamental, unshakable part of their world. The law protected everyone, but it didn't protect everyone equally. Finally, what did these people believe? Religion wasn't just something for Sundays, or in their case, for grand temple ceremonies. It was woven into the fabric of daily life. Nearly every home had a small altar for household gods and ancestors. People made offerings and said prayers for health, prosperity, and protection. Major religious festivals were huge public events, often tied to the agricultural calendar, like the Spring Harvest Festival. These celebrations brought the whole community together, reinforcing their shared culture and connection to the gods who they believed controlled their world. So, when we look at the Old Babylonian Empire, we see more than just a kingdom ruled by a powerful king. We see a remarkably complex and organized society. It was a world governed by an intricate web of laws that touched everything from international trade to family disputes. It was a society of farmers, merchants, scribes, and slaves, all playing their part in a system designed for stability and order. The legacy of Old Babylonia isn't just in its monuments, but in this sophisticated blueprint for civilization, a system where law and bureaucracy manage the daily lives of millions. It's a fascinating glimpse into a world both alien and surprisingly familiar. The death of Hammurabi in 1750 BC marked the end of an era for the Old Babylonian Empire. His reign, spanning nearly 4 decades, had established Babylon as the preeminent power in Mesopotamia through careful administration, legal innovation, and military conquest. The structures of governance, law, and control he implemented created a system that held together a diverse and expansive empire. Yet, with his passing, the stability that had sustained the empire began to falter. The systems Hammurabi created proved vulnerable without his centralized authority, and the empire's cohesion started to unravel. Hammurabi's successor was his son, Samsa-Iluna, who inherited a vast empire extending over much of Mesopotamia. However, Samsa-Iluna's rule faced immediate challenges that tested the resilience of Babylon's institutions. The Old Babylonian Empire was composed of numerous city-states and regions, each with its local rulers, customs, and interests. While Hammurabi had kept these diverse entities united through a combination of strong central control and an enforced legal framework, Samsa-Iluna confronted a shifting political landscape marked by increasing regional autonomy and dissent. Central to the empire's structure were the governors or officials appointed by the king to oversee different provinces. These governors, often titled ensis or kakanakyu, held significant administrative and military power within their territories. Under Hammurabi's reign, they operated under close royal supervision, carrying out the king's policies, collecting taxes, maintaining order, and managing irrigation and agriculture. Their loyalty to the king was crucial for maintaining the empire's unity. However, after Hammurabi's death, some governors began to act more independently. Evidence from surviving tablets and administrative texts suggests that a number of these provincial leaders withheld taxes, raised their own troops, and resisted directives from Babylon. This gradual erosion of central authority created a patchwork of semi-autonomous regions where local rulers pursued their own interests, sometimes in conflict with the central government. This decentralization weakened Babylon's grip on its territories and led to fragmentation. Some city-states that had been subdued during Hammurabi's campaigns reasserted their independence. For example, Larsa, a southern Mesopotamian city, became a significant challenger to Babylonian authority under its local rulers. This resurgence of regional powers destabilized the political order established under Hammurabi. Meanwhile, external pressures compounded internal difficulties. The Assyrians, who occupied northern Mesopotamia, began to increase their military activities, initially a distant and less developed power. Assyria was growing in strength and ambition during this period. Assyrian forces conducted raids into Babylonian-controlled lands, putting further strain on the empire's defenses. Similarly, the Kassites, a group originating from the Zagros Mountains to the east, started migrating into Babylonian territories. Their incursions disrupted local communities and further weakened Babylon's hold over its eastern borders. These geopolitical pressures exposed the limitations of Babylon's military and administrative capacity following Hammurabi. Unlike his centralized and personally authoritative rule, Samsa-Iluna and subsequent kings struggled to mobilize and coordinate the empire's defenses effectively. The army, once a powerful instrument of expansion and control, found itself overextended and under-resourced. At the same time, economic and environmental factors played a critical role in the empire's decline. Mesopotamian agriculture relied heavily on a sophisticated system of canals, dikes, and irrigation networks to control the flow of water from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These irrigation systems were vital for supporting the dense populations of Babylonian cities and producing the agricultural surplus that sustained the economy and fed armies. Maintaining this infrastructure required constant attention and coordinated effort. Under Hammurabi, centralized administration ensured regular canal maintenance and flood control. However, with the weakening of royal authority and increasing regional autonomy, the upkeep of irrigation systems became inconsistent. Canals silted up, dikes weakened, and flooding or droughts damaged fields. Reduced agricultural productivity had immediate economic consequences. Food shortages emerged in some areas, disrupting the supply chain to urban centers and the military. Tax revenues, often collected in grain or other agricultural produce, declined as farms failed to yield expected harvests. This reduction in resources limited the central government's ability to fund administration, pay officials, and support military campaigns. Legal and social stability also suffered. The Code of Hammurabi had established a framework of laws designed to regulate social relations, protect property rights, and maintain order. However, enforcing these laws required an effective and impartial bureaucracy. With the decline of centralized power, local authorities sometimes disregarded or manipulated legal codes for personal gain. Legal documents from the period reveal an increase in petitions and disputes submitted to the royal court. Citizens brought complaints regarding land ownership and paid debts, inheritance, and other civil matters. The rising volume of legal cases suggests growing social tensions and conflicts that strain the judicial system. The capacity of the government to deliver justice uniformly weakened, resulting in irregular enforcement and the erosion of public confidence in the rule of law. Corruption also became a growing problem. Some officials and local governors exploited their positions to enrich themselves, imposing unauthorized taxes or accepting bribes. Such practices further undermined the legitimacy of the government and aggravated social divisions. The social fabric of Babylonian society, which was stratified into classes such as free citizens, clients, and slaves, experienced pressure from these instabilities. Property disputes and debt slavery cases became more common as economic hardships increased. Legal protections that had previously shielded certain groups were less reliably upheld. Religious institutions, closely linked with political authority, also faced challenges. Temples functioned not only as places of worship but also as economic centers controlling large estates and resources. The priesthood played a role in the administration of justice and governance, supporting the king's divine legitimacy. As royal power declined, some temples and priests gained increased autonomy. This shift altered the balance of power between the religious and secular authorities. The king's role as mediator between the gods and the people was less effectively communicated or enforced. diminishing his ideological control. Despite these difficulties, Babylon continued to be a significant cultural and economic center during this period. Trade networks remained active, connecting Mesopotamia with surrounding regions. Babylonian scholars and scribes maintained traditions of learning and writing, preserving knowledge that had been accumulated over centuries. Archaeological evidence indicates that scribal schools and libraries persisted, and temples remained centers for education and ritual. These cultural continuities contributed to the survival of Babylonian identity even as political power waned. Nevertheless, the empire's political and administrative system was fragile. The loss of strong centralized leadership, combined with internal dissent, external invasions, economic decline, and social unrest, eroded the foundations laid during Hammurabi's reign. This period after Hammurabi exemplifies the difficulties faced by large empires in maintaining cohesion over time. It demonstrates how the balance between central authority and local power is delicate, requiring continuous management and effective governance. Ultimately, the weakening of the Old Babylonian Empire's system created conditions for its eventual downfall. In the decades following Samsa-Luna's reign, the empire fragmented further, leaving Babylon vulnerable to foreign incursions. The system that had once unified a vast and diverse territory unraveled under the weight of multiple pressures. This phase in Babylonian history illustrates how institutional decline can lead to political disintegration, even in societies with advanced legal codes, administrative practices, and cultural achievements. In the year 1595 BC, a cataclysmic event unfolded that would forever alter the course of ancient Mesopotamian history. The mighty Old Babylonian Empire, which had flourished for centuries, faced an enemy it never saw coming. This is the story of the Hittite shock, a daring military campaign that brought the jewel of Mesopotamia, the city of Babylon, to its knees. The story begins in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, the heartland of the Hittite kingdom. Over several centuries, they had grown into a formidable power, renowned for their advanced military technology, particularly their mastery of chariot warfare. Under the ambitious leadership of King Mursili I, the Hittites looked beyond their borders, eager to project their power into the wider world. Their sights were set on a prize of unimaginable value, Babylon. Meanwhile, the Old Babylonian Empire was a shadow of its former self. After the death of its legendary ruler, Hammurabi, the empire had begun to fray. Internal divisions and a weakening central government left it vulnerable. While Babylon was still a beacon of culture and wealth, its military strength had waned, leaving it ill-prepared to fend off a sudden, determined invasion from a highly organized foe. Mursili I's campaign was a masterclass in speed and strategy. His army marched hundreds of miles south, deep into Mesopotamian territory. This wasn't a slow, grinding siege, it was a blitzkrieg of the ancient world. The Hittite forces, led by their feared chariot corps, moved with incredible swiftness, overwhelming local resistance before Babylon could even mount a coordinated defense. They swept through the fertile lands of northern Mesopotamia, their advance a harbinger of the doom to come. The fall of Babylon was a moment of profound shock and destruction. The city that had stood for centuries as a center of power, religion, and culture was breached and plundered. Its legendary fortifications were torn down, its sacred temples desecrated, and its royal palaces looted. The message was clear and brutal: a new power had arrived, and the old order was shattered. In a move of immense symbolic power, the Hittites seized the statue of Marduk, Babylon's chief deity and the protector of the city. This was more than just looting a religious artifact. In ancient Mesopotamia, the patron god's statue embodied the city's divine right to rule. By taking Marduk, the Hittites were symbolically stripping Babylon of its legitimacy, its divine favor, and its very soul. It was a theological blow from which the Old Babylonian Empire would never recover. The sacred order that had underpinned Babylonian society for generations was broken. The impact of this act was catastrophic. The temples, which were not just spiritual centers but also the administrative and economic hearts of the empire, were destabilized. With the statue of Marduk gone, the ideological foundation of Babylonian kingship crumbled. The divine authority that legitimized the king's rule had been stolen, leaving a power vacuum in its wake. In the aftermath of the sack, the Old Babylonian Empire effectively ceased to exist as a unified political force. The raid shattered the existing power structures, plunging the region into a period of chaos and uncertainty, while the city of Babylon itself would eventually recover. The grand empire built by Hammurabi and his predecessors was gone forever, dismantled in a single, swift campaign. This power vacuum didn't last long. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so does ancient politics. A new group, the Kassites, who had long been a thorn in Babylon's side from the Zagros Mountains, saw their opportunity. They gradually moved into the region, establishing control over Babylon and founding a new dynasty that would rule for centuries. A new chapter in Mesopotamian history had begun. Yet, despite the political collapse and military humiliation, the spirit of Babylon endured. It remained a vital cultural and religious center. Its immense contributions to law, literature, science, and theology were so profound that they continued to shape civilizations across the Near East for centuries to come. The city's survival is a testament to the resilience of its culture and traditions, even in the face of total defeat. The Hittite shock of 1595 BC was truly a watershed moment. It marked the definitive end of the Old Babylonian Empire's dominance, ushering in an era of fragmentation and the rise of new regional powers. But it also set the stage for the next phase of Mesopotamian history, one where new dynasties would rise and fall, but the cultural legacy of Babylon would prove to be eternal. It was a dramatic end, but also a new beginning. The sack of Babylon wasn't just the destruction of a city, it was an event that redrew the map of the ancient world. Thank you for watching, and be sure to follow for more incredible stories from our ancient past. The Old Babylonian Empire, though lasting only a few centuries from approximately 1900 to 1595 year BC, established foundational elements that shaped the trajectory of human civilization for millennia. Despite its relatively brief political dominance, its influence extended far beyond its borders and time, affecting legal systems, administrative governance, political theology, culture, and science throughout the ancient Near East and into subsequent eras. To understand the true importance of the Old Babylonian Empire is to recognize how the innovations developed within this society have had enduring impact on the organization of complex societies. Central among the empire's achievements was the establishment of codified law. The Code of Hammurabi remains one of the most significant legal documents preserved from antiquity. Inscribed in cuneiform on large basalt steles and displayed publicly, the code set forth specific laws regulating various aspects of daily life: property rights, commercial transactions, family relations, labor responsibilities, and penalties for offenses. This code was not simply a collection of rules but represented a deliberate effort to unify and regulate a diverse population under one legal framework. The importance of such codification lies in the shift it represented from customary, orally transmitted laws to written statutes accessible to the public and enforceable by the state. Through this legal text, Babylonian rulers institutionalized the concept of rule of law, principle that the actions of individuals and authorities must conform to established regulations. This formalized legal framework provided stability in a society marked by complex economic interactions and social hierarchies. While punishments prescribed in the code varied depending on social class, free men, commoners, and slaves faced different consequences. The overall framework aimed to provide predictability in the administration of justice. This was a significant advancement in governance, one that distinguished Babylonian rule from arbitrary or personal exercise of power. The code influenced later legal traditions across Mesopotamia and, in more indirect ways, the development of legal thought in other ancient civilizations, including the Hebrew Bible and beyond. Beyond law, the Old Babylonian Empire's bureaucracy was a key factor in its ability to govern and manage a large and diverse population. The empire employed a well-organized administrative system, relying heavily on trained scribes who maintained detailed records. These records included economic transactions, tax receipts, land leases, and agricultural production data. Tablets discovered by archaeologists illustrate the extent of this record-keeping, revealing a highly structured system capable of mobilizing resources and enforcing regulations. The education and role of scribes were central to this bureaucratic function. Scribes were trained in specialized schools where they learned cuneiform writing, mathematics, and administrative procedures. These individuals formed the backbone of the empire's administration, serving as intermediaries between the ruling class and the populace. Their work ensured continuity in governance, as well as the preservation of administrative, legal, and literary texts. This extensive bureaucratic system also provided a basis for economic stability. The administration managed irrigation systems critical to agriculture in the arid Mesopotamian environment. Through coordinated efforts, water resources were allocated efficiently, ensuring agricultural productivity that supported urban populations and military forces. The centralization of such resources was a hallmark of the empire's capacity to maintain order and promote economic development. Religion and political ideology were tightly intertwined in the Old Babylonian state. The elevation of the god Marduk to the head of the Mesopotamian pantheon symbolized the consolidation of political and religious authority. The state promoted Marduk as the divine patron of Babylon and legitimized the king's rule through his association with this deity. The king was portrayed as chosen and supported by Marduk, a concept that reinforced the authority of the monarchy and helped to unify the empire's diverse peoples under a common religious framework. Temples dedicated to Marduk and other gods were not only centers of worship but also hubs of economic and administrative activity. Temple complexes controlled significant land holdings and employed large numbers of personnel. Priests conducted rituals and festivals that reinforced social cohesion and maintained the divine order believed necessary for the stability of the state. This fusion of religious and political power was characteristic of Mesopotamian governance and persisted in successor states. Cultural achievements during the Old Babylonian period further extended its legacy. Literary works such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, composed or preserved in this era, reflect the sophistication of Babylonian intellectual life. These texts explore universal themes, including mortality, friendship, and the relationship between humans and the divine. The transmission of such literature contributed to a shared cultural heritage that influenced later civilizations. Advances in science and mathematics also marked this period. Babylonian scholars developed complex numerical systems and made astronomical observations that allowed for the prediction of celestial events. Their mathematical knowledge was applied in land surveying, construction, and the calendar system. These intellectual pursuits underscore the role of the Old Babylonian Empire as a center of learning and innovation. Though the Old Babylonian Empire eventually declined following the sack of Babylon by the Hittites in 1595 BC, its institutional and cultural foundations endured. Babylon continued to be a significant religious and cultural center under subsequent regimes, including the Kassites, Assyrians, and later Neo-Babylonians. The principles of law, administration, and religious political ideology established during the Old Babylonian period informed governance practices in these later empires. Moreover, the Old Babylonian legacy extended beyond Mesopotamia's borders. The legal and administrative concepts developed their influence neighboring regions and cultures. Elements of Babylonian law are reflected in the codes and legal traditions of other ancient Near Eastern societies. Religious ideas, particularly concerning divine kingship and the role of deities in statecraft, found resonance throughout the ancient world. In a broader perspective, the Old Babylonian Empire's contributions illustrate how early complex societies created systems to manage diversity, enforce order, and maintain stability. Its emphasis on codified law and bureaucratic governance set precedents that resonate in modern political and legal institutions. The empire demonstrated that durable power often depends on structured administration and ideology as much as military strength. The story of the Old Babylonian Empire also offers insights into the challenges faced by early states. Maintaining centralized control over a large territory required continuous effort and capable leadership. The eventual fragmentation following Hammurabi's death and the external shocks such as the Hittite invasion highlight vulnerabilities inherent in such systems. Yet the empire's resilience is evident in how its core ideas persisted and adapted over time. The city of Babylon itself survived as a locus of cultural memory and revival, its legacy woven into the historical fabric of Mesopotamia and beyond. The empire's innovations in law, administration, religion, and culture provided a foundation that influenced political and intellectual developments for centuries. In conclusion, the Old Babylonian Empire, despite its relatively brief political ascendancy, remains a pivotal chapter in human history. Its achievements in codifying law, organizing bureaucracy, integrating religion with governance, and fostering cultural and scientific advancements established enduring patterns of civilization. These contributions have left a lasting imprint on the development of complex societies, making the Old Babylonian Empire a subject of enduring study and significance.